I want to talk about a point I made in a thread about magazines that I used to read in the 80s and 90s. It led me to thinking about anti-Semitism in a way that I want to explore. One of the popular sports among social terrorists on the left is looking at people's past conduct and their statements and flagging them for unwoke, racist, and I'd use scare quotes because the term has really lost its meaning, or anti-Semitic offenses. I have two observations about this. First one is, it's rather easier to assimilate for some people than for others. People grow. This should not only apply to Democratic politicians. It's preposterous that the sins of youth, to me, a grandfather, writ very large, should socially damn an entire life. The fact is, I know and am friends with a number of people who in their early days probably said or even believed some very stupid things about Jews. I say Jews because as a Jew, I have the magical power to forgive this sin, but not other kinds of bigotry, right? No, not right. As a Jew or as a woman, whatever, is not a relevant formulation. Hardly. Anyone is entitled to make a fair assessment of another's character for his own purposes, regardless of whether past offenses directly targeted his category or not. This is really a side issue. The real issue is, what is the person's character today? What does he do or say with respect to people and categories? Race, sex, religion, whatever. Sort of the opposite of the rule applied to Donald Trump. In fact, I once said in a discussion about hate crimes that the liberal obsession with what's really in someone's heart and what he really means when he says something, dog whistles, is ridiculous. What does a man say plainly? What does he do? So my first point is people grow. And if we're intent on assessing their character vis-a-vis the modern cardinal sin of not only noticing, but preferring one group over another based on immutable characteristics, let's look at them now, not a decade ago, not even yesterday. My second point will set the world on fire, or maybe even get me banned. It's this. I don't really care that much if people do have such preferences and even express them, as long as they don't act on them. There's no bigger lie in our culture than this, that the normal, or at least realistically attainable, and certainly the only decent sensibility for a person is to never notice the differences among groups of people, or associate certain behaviors with groups, or categorically prefer to date or marry those within their own groups. This preposterous lie about human nature is born on the wings of the popular aphorism that you have to teach prejudice to children. You cannot have actually reared your own children and believe this. My extraordinary mate, Jane Coleman, and I have reared children. And like others who have done so, we know this. Children are scared of things and people and characteristics that are new or unusual to them. This prejudice is very understandable. If you believe in evolutionary theory, it's obvious why it would be. I had a child who was prejudiced. He was prejudiced against my own late father, his grandfather. Why? Because my grandmother had a beard when this child was a toddler. And back then I didn't. And the boy was not used to beards. And the facial hair scared him. He cried when my father, my gentle, loving father, came near. This is human nature. Now, as we get older, we get more sophisticated. And the sooner we get out among people with different kinds of characteristics, the sooner and better we learn that these characteristics in and of themselves do not make people better or worse. This is an advantage of living in the city, by the way. I was once a big brother. A big brother, for a boy, you needed a little extra support. And he grew up in an all-white suburb. And during one of our hangouts, I asked him if he liked basketball, and he said yes. I said, let's go to this park where you'll see local guys play basketball that will amaze you. You won't believe what just a bunch of guys in New Jersey, how good they can be. And he agreed, and we went. And when we got there, he realized they were black. Well, of course they were. If you're not prejudiced in favor of black basketball players, you're a schmuck. Well, we sat there in the bleachers 20 or 30 feet away watching this playground pickup game. And the kid is absolutely terrified. He's never been this close to black men in his life. He could not enjoy the game or the athleticism of the players. He could not get past his fear of black men, not because he'd been traumatized by an encounter with a black man, not because they were different, rather because they were different. And he'd picked up cultural signs that made him afraid. We had to leave. Noticing differences and not being able to assimilate them and feel comfortable with them is not a moral crime. It's something to be reckoned with, but the encounter with the other may come slowly or in odd patches or never at all. It may come unpleasantly. And people learn from their experiences. And while a baby is scared merely of that which is different, even a grown person can come to generalize irrationally based on a correlation of negative experiences and immutable characteristics. And 180 degrees from that irrationality is another sort of irrationality, which is to say that these characteristics can never, ever, even probabilistic, predict a quality. That's irrational, stupid even. Is it crazy to say Jews are very verbal, smart, funny? No, it's a generalization. In fact, many Jews are none of those things. But it's not a generalization without some use in understanding the world, because categories and generalizations organize all the countless things into files in our minds. Now here it comes. Are generalizations about groups of people only useful or meaningful when they're positive characteristics? Obviously not. And here's the difference. When it comes to negative characteristics, it's appropriate and decent to handle them differently. I might think a certain group has a certain negative trait based on my observation of things in the world, but that doesn't make me a racist or a bigot. It makes me a non-idiot. What makes me a racist or a bigot is acting on it, treating people differently based on it. We need to be honest about this, because there's a different kind of dishonesty about it if we pretend it's not true. When I was in college, you could pick up a little extra pocket money by signing up to participate in psychology experiments for psychology students, and I liked doing this. Once I was told to sit in a waiting room until someone came to get me. The person came, and we walked down a corridor that led to 2 rooms, one on either side. They were essentially identical rooms, and each one had a young man sitting at a desk. Maybe you know where this is going. I was told to go into either room for the next part of the experiment. It didn't matter which one. One of the young men was white. The other was black. Neither made eye contact with me. Obviously, I went into the room with the black guy. If I didn't, it would seem as if I were prejudiced. Even if no one were watching or keeping track, it would seem to me as if I were prejudiced. So I did that. And the person who took me down the corridor said, "Thank you. That's the experiment. Congratulations. You're not prejudiced." Really? Of course I am. I went into the room with the black guy because he was black. But you know what else? Maybe there's nothing wrong with this. Maybe it's fine that I did this. Is it not okay to make a little extra effort or even appear to be unbiased because this has an effect on the conduct of others? That it might be decent? I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to be able to ask the fellow at the desk, how do you feel knowing that I chose to go into your room and do you a favor of showing you that I'm not prejudiced against you? Maybe he's cool with it. Maybe he's not. These are not easy questions. But surely I did not commit a crime by noticing the difference and acting on it. If this is structural racism, then so are set-asides and DoorDash throwing up a black-owned restaurants page when I log in to order a pizza. I didn't ask him to do that. I don't know. All this is an introduction to my second point. Between this interior, human, intelligent, and adaptive habit of generalizing about groups versus actually judging people by their character and not by the color of their skin is a lot of daylight. This is the rub. That space is mostly occupied by speech. A good amount of jurisprudential time, effort, and ink has been spent on distinguishing between conduct and speech. That's beyond our topic today. But it is the rub, especially in culture and social media. A minstrel show is speech, but it is very offensive speech. And putting on a minstrel show, you could argue, is offensive conduct that should be off limits under most circumstances. Not by the government, but among people. But how about jokes, op-eds, tweets, private conversations, emails, texts, Slack messages? Does the use of generalizations, tropes, stereotypes damn the character of the person who made them, period? Does that person deserve to be banned from public life? Deemed guilty of hate? Deplatformed? Maybe. I think, though, it depends on the body of work, on the context, on whether something that appears to have been a joke really was a joke, even if it didn't make you laugh. In my Supreme Court case for the slants, we convinced the court that magic words themselves do not, under the First Amendment, have magic qualities, that under the First Amendment may affect the distribution of government services. It took little convincing. The decision was 8-0. It's mind-boggling that the mere fact that the First Amendment does not, let us stipulate, govern non-governmental censorship, that the logic of that conclusion has been lost on us. In naming his band The Slants, Simon Tam wanted to say something about differentness. Differentness and the experiences and qualities of differentness are real. Not to observe them is impossible. To pretend not to observe them is polite, but false. To treat people differently in ordinary discourse based on them can be barbaric. It can also be something less. Sometimes people are bigoted, prejudiced, unreasonable in their application of generalizations or dislikes to groups. And you know what? That doesn't make them inhuman either, especially if they keep their hands to themselves and don't violate the laws regarding discrimination. Those laws exist in America and they're not going anywhere. If you're discriminated against in your work or other legally protected areas, maybe you have a valid legal claim. Generally speaking, these laws establish pretty good guidelines. Cancel culture, however, goes far beyond those guidelines. It goes back in time. It goes not to how people treat each other in commerce or accommodations, but purportedly into people's hearts and souls. Cancel culture denies the reality of human experience, the richness of human communication, the nuances of human interaction, and the dynamic nature of human growth, learning, and understanding. And cancel culture does all this without a hint of due process. It's a mob phenomenon enforced by corporate and technology oligarchs that literally profit from it. Well, having said that, here finally is my second point. If some of my friends and people I know were once bigoted or prejudiced, that doesn't mean they are now. And if they aren't now, based on their conduct toward me and towards others, that's all I have to go on. I cannot read their hearts and minds. I'm good. More. Could they have residual prejudice? Could they not really have let it all go? Could they just be treating me nicely because I'm so great? I don't know. I don't care. Their character is revealed to me by their conduct. This is how it should